Gottlieb and Schneider have done everything they can to barricade the door, but it still might not be enough. The force on the other side strikes the door again and again, rattling the integrity of the barricade. The horrific sounds of snarling and growling emanate through the metal. They're driven by some unholy mix of hunger and fury, the creatures outside. And given enough time, they will get in. Security Officer Schneider injects the magazine of his handgun and counts the remaining bullets. 5. That's not enough to take down even one of these monsters, let alone the army assembled outside. The deep scratches on his cheeks sting like battery acid. He'd survived 2 different SCP-682 security breaches. Was this really how he was going to die? He turned his gaze to the man in the lab coat, pacing back and forth. Dr. Roy Gottlieb nervously wrings his hands. He can't help but feel reasonable for the terror he's unleashed on Site-19. But that's really only the start of this. If this nightmare gets out, the whole world would be at risk. What an incredibly stupid way to bring about an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario. And it's all his fault. The result of one silly little experiment. The barricade buckles and the doors burst open. Dr. Gottlieb and Officer Schneider brace themselves. There's a lethal rainbow of fur, packed tight, waiting for them on the other side. But let's rewind a few hours to before everything went sideways at Site-19. It's true that poor Dr. Gottlieb had triggered the containment breach that would take many lives, but it's also true that nobody could have seen this particular scenario coming, as Dr. Gottlieb wheeled a containment unit full of incredibly expensive animal costumes into Research Cell 109B. Of course, these weren't just any animal costumes. They were fursuits, specifically tailored outfits, meant to represent the anthropomorphized animal persona, or fursona, of a member of the furry subculture. Furries enjoy role-playing as these characters at meetups or conventions, and for the more mysteriously wealthy of these furries, the fursuits can cost more than a designer 3-piece suit. Nobody knew exactly where Dr. Gottlieb had obtained the several fursuits he intended to use in testing that day, but Dr. Gears had inexplicably approved his proposal to test them in SCP-914, the Clockworks. For those not in the know, this fantastical machine, formed of 2 booths labeled intake and output, a control console, and a vast and mysterious array of clockwork mechanisms, is capable of transforming anything placed into it in a variety of ways, depending on whether it's set to rough, coarse, 1-to-1, fine, and very fine. Dr. Gottlieb, driven by an implacable curiosity, was ready to find out how these settings would alter his mysteriously obtained selection of fursuits. Research Assistant Klein took the first of the fursuits, a high-quality blue and purple bear costume, and placed it into the intake booth. Dr. Gottlieb switched the setting to rough and set the great rumbling beast of a machine into motion. After a brief conversion period, the output booth opened, revealing the tattered remains of the blue and purple bear fursuit, looking like it'd been put through an industrial paper shredder. It was an almost criminal waste of $3,000, but Dr. Gottlieb was unfazed. Once Researcher Assistant Klein had finished sweeping the desecrated remains of the suit out of the booth, it was time to move on to the second phase of testing. A fursuit of a brightly colored toucan was placed into the intake booth by Research Assistant Klein. Dr. Gottlieb set the machine to coarse, and once it was done, the result was a pile of neatly cut fabric strips, as though the suit had been dismantled by a tailor for parts. This was about in line with what Dr. Gottlieb expected, and once Klein had removed the pieces of fabric from the output booth, he was ready for things to get a little more interesting. A turquoise monkey fursuit was next placed into the Clockworks on the 1-to-1 setting. Once the machine was activated, the fursuit became a bright red gorilla fursuit. This made sense, seeing as the 1-to-1 setting always produced something that was roughly equivalent to the item placed into the intake booth. Rather than wasting another fursuit, Dr. Gottlieb made Researcher Klein move that same red gorilla fursuit back into the intake booth and set the setting to fine. The result, essentially the same fursuit, but made out of a much higher quality material and with a better sense of craftsmanship. It would have a retail value of around $2,800, which would hopefully recoup some of the financial loss incurred by the fursuits annihilated during the first and second round of testing. But really, all of this was just a prelude. The true allure of SCP-914, the thing that kept researchers coming back, whether they liked to admit it or not, was the very fine setting. It was the ultimate wildcard. Anything placed into the machine would be anomalously improved, with entirely unpredictable effects. Dr. Gottlieb would never admit it, but deep down, he held a forbidden desire: the perfect fursuit. The ultimate addition to his collection. Something that would make him the belle of the ball at any furry convention he attended in his off hours, providing he could sneak the perfect anomalous fursuit out of Site-19 after testing. That's why the fursuit reserved for the very fine test was of his own fursona, Jackson, a brilliant blue fox, and a costume he had worn many times and hoped to wear many times more. If only he knew the horror he was about to unleash. When Research Assistant Klein placed the Jackson fursuit into the intake booth, Dr. Gottlieb feverishly twisted the knob on the selection panel to very fine. Yes, oh yes, he would have his prize. The machine shuddered and chugged, its huge mass of steampunk circuitry imbuing the Jackson suit with impossible anomalous power. When the output booth opened, fog spilled out into the room, with all the pomp and circumstance of Darth Vader's introduction in A New Hope. And yet, it seemed like inside, there was just the same old fursuit. Brilliant blue Jackson. Dr. Gottlieb's heart sank. All this effort, all the destroyed fursuits, it had all been for nothing. With a great sense of personal disappointment, Dr. Gottlieb ordered Research Assistant Klein to collect Jackson and finish the test. But as Klein approached, the unpredictable anomalous effect imbued by the Clockworks started to take effect. Jackson, a supposedly inert suit on the ground of the output booth, began to writhe and wriggle, as though filled with rats. Klein was startled, but he didn't react quickly enough to save himself from the nightmare about to unfold. Jackson leapt onto Klein with a nightmarish screech. The fibers burned when they touched his skin, burrowing into his every pore. As the fursuit enveloped him, Klein screamed in terrible agony, but it evoked no sympathy in the monster swallowing him whole. Dr. Gottlieb could hardly believe what he was seeing. His favorite fursuit was bonding to his research assistant, covering him and hijacking his body like a parasite. Even when the suit had fully covered Klein's body, the poor man did not stop screaming. Every moment was agony, but he was no longer in control. The figure that had once been Klein turned on him. It was like a nightmare come to life. Gottlieb saw the glassy eyes of Jackson staring at him. It was time to run. Gottlieb turned on his heel and sprinted out of the testing chamber. He heard the footsteps of Jackson speeding behind him, claws pounding on tiles. Klein's screams echoing out of the suit like a siren. There was no time to even process what was happening. This terrible new monster needed to be stopped. There were 2 armed guards out of the hall. Gottlieb yelled for them to respond, that something dangerous was chasing him. When the guards pulled their pistols and prepared for a fight, they never could have expected a bright blue fursuit with a shrieking man inside to shamble out of Research Cell 109-B. For a moment they suppressed laughter, but when the stranger began running towards them, they opened fire and peppered the humanoid monster with bullets. Klein screamed inside the suit as the bullets perforated him, but the suit itself, controlling his every motion, did not hesitate. It ran up to one of the guards and grabbed him by the chin and back of the head. With one sharp twist and a crunch, the guard fell to the ground. SCP-173 would be proud. The other guard was less lucky. At least the first died quickly. As Gottlieb watched in confusion and horror, Jackson chomped down onto the surviving guard's arm. The guard let out a pained yelp, but seconds later, Jackson pulled away, and watched as the awful transformation began. The guard spasmed and seized, his veins coursing with poison. Clumps of red fur sprouted from his skin, his skeletal structure growing and warping. After a few moments of painful transformation, the guard became something else entirely. A fursuit, a giant anthropomorphic parrot to be specific. Where there had once been one, now there were a terrible 2. Dr. Gottlieb sounded the alarm and ran for his life. Things descended into chaos relatively quickly after that. A mobile task force was dispatched to the site, told that there was an aggressive and possibly pathogenic anomaly rapidly spreading through Site-19. But when they saw that the threat in question was a gaggle of vicious mutant furries, they paused for a moment of confusion. And that moment was all the monsters needed to take advantage of. In hallway 15C, some researchers were cowering as a gaggle of colorful humanoid coyotes bore down on them. It was impossible to tell if the people they once were laughing or crying. In the break room, Dr. Clef was wielding his favorite pump-action shotgun. A bright green baboon was running at him when Clef unleashed a blast full of buckshot into the freakish furry's chest, sending it skidding across the ground and into the announcement board. Blood spread out across the suit, but the monster was not dead. It quickly righted itself, twisting and setting its bones back into place. It had shrugged off the shotgun blast with little effort. Luckily for Dr. Clef, he still had plenty of ammo left, and he was more than eager to impart it into the anomalous body of his new semi-human friend. One of the D-class bunks, on the other hand, were an absolute bloodbath. Most of the prisoners were sleeping when the man fused with a crocodile suit tore open the reinforced door. They didn't even have time to scream before several mutant furries ran in and started biting them, kicking off a flurry of horrifying transformations. By the time they were done, it looked like a cartoon zoo in there. And soon enough, Site-19 had a zoo loose. The mobile task force were hopelessly outmatched. Even with high-powered assault rifles, they somehow couldn't slow the advance of the furry menace. Their claws tore through tactical gear like cheap toilet paper. The one saving grace when the MTF operatives transformed was that their big, cartoonish hands no longer had the dexterity to operate guns. Not that it stopped them from causing all manner of carnage. One security guard, Officer Schneider, watched his entire squad get infected and brutally transform. Every second of it looked unimaginably painful, to lose yourself and become something else. He grabbed the rifle with the highest stopping power he could find and opened fire onto the beast men pursuing him. Headshots did not kill them, but it seemed to at least slow them down more than body shots. He was not going to get murdered or changed by one of these Technicolor horrors. There had to be someone who knew what was going on and how to stop it. Meanwhile, the one person who did know what was going on, Dr. Gottlieb, had no idea how to solve it. He'd sequestered himself away in one of the most secure and secretive research chambers in the facility, an automated surgical theater. He'd been able to use a high-powered tranquilizer to briefly subdue the Jackson Klein creature and strap it to a surgical gurney with heavy restraints. It didn't take long for the creature to come to again, struggling against its bindings. "Don't worry, Klein," Gottlieb said as he readied his scalpel and approached the bound anomaly. "I'm gonna get you out of there." He felt tremendous guilt for everything he'd triggered, but if he could save Patient Zero, perhaps he could save them all, undo the damage he'd done. He made an incision on the front of his beloved Jackson suit, the one that had caused all this pain, and tried to pull it open, hoping to rip Klein from his anomalous bindings. But the Klein inside was not the one he remembered. It was a skeleton, covered in woven fibers like a new nervous system. Klein had been digested inside Jackson. Whatever was happening to all these people, it was permanent, irreversible. Dr. Gottlieb had killed them all. As if activated by Gottlieb's fear, the fursuit began wriggling again. It closed over what was left of Klein and shook the gurney with tremendous force. The restraints started to buckle and rip. Gottlieb needed to run. He darted out of the room, closing the secure door behind him, hoping that will at least buy him some time. Out in the hall, he ran into Security Officer Schneider, who managed to narrowly escape the anomalous furries with his life. But he was not unscathed. His tactical armor was damaged, and there were deep ruts clawed into one of his cheeks. Dr. Gottlieb was sobbing. He choked out a confession. This was all his fault. He caused it. Everyone was dead, or changed. There was nothing. This brings us back to the start of our sordid tale. Dr. Gottlieb was standing in the barricaded room with Officer Schneider as the mutant furries burst in through the door. Gottlieb braced to be bitten, to be beaten, but it never happened. They didn't attack Officer Schneider either, because it was already too late. The scratch had worked its magic slower than the bite, but he was still infected. Officer Schneider became a colorful plush animal like all the others, and Dr. Gottlieb was alone. They all stood still, watching.
"What are you waiting for?"
Dr. Gottlieb screamed in a moment of madness.
"What are you all waiting for?"
They didn't infect Dr. Gottlieb. Instead, as a unit, they guided him back to Research Cell 109-B. Despite his protests, he was forced into the intake booth of SCP-914. He banged his fist on the door and screamed to be let out, but nothing happened. All the furries stood outside and silently watched. Jackson, who had once been Klein, approached the control panel and switched the selection to rough. Now go check out SCP-682 but an SCP-914. And what if SCP-1471 Mal-O was put inside SCP-914?